Rise, all loyal infants, and listen to some hip white bros talk about if the Big 12 should forego a bid from BYU in the face of slews of criticism of the way gays are treated at BYU. Oh, rise and shout, the infants are out along the trail to relative obscurity. Rise and shout as they talk about and criticize the Lord's University. On they'll go to defend homos as alma mater's sons and, just sons. They will smack around a letter written and passed around, asking the commission to put back on the shelf BYU's bid for the Big 12. The guy who wrote this part of the fight song didn't try real hard. Go Infants!
This is Infants on Thrones. The philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the Quorum.
Smack. Smack.
Smack. Smack.
Up.
Smack up. Smack up.
All right. Well, to give a background on what's going on, BYU is no longer, at least its football team, and that's really all they care about because that's the only revenue producing sport in almost all colleges is the football team. So football team is paramount to any athletic program for any university. And BYU for the last few years has tried to go the Notre Dame path, which, it's a little bit more difficult for a Mormon.
But you got to explain what that means to people who don't know.
I am, but I'm saying, to go the Notre Dame path, it's like Notre Dame's huge.
But what is the Notre Dame path?
I'm gonna tell it. Jesus Christ! Shut the fuck up for 10 seconds.
But what is it though?
Oh my gosh!
Oh, you're so fucking annoying. All right.
Just listening now.
Yeah, try it. You should try it because I have a whole history to go through here, and I was very skeptical that I'd be able to get through it with you, not interrupting me and misdirecting the conversation in a different direction.
Are you feeling picked on, Glenn?
A little bit.
All right, so BYU is trying to go the Notre Dame path, which is big shoes to fill, and the Notre Dame path is not being affiliated. At least their football team, which is the case with Notre Dame, only their football team is not affiliated with any official conference. If anyone remembers, BYU in the past was affiliated with the Western Athletic Conference and then the Mountain West Conference.
Right.
And what that brings is shared revenue. So, but when you go independent, you only get your own revenue.
Right.
But Notre Dame is so big, they got their own television network, and it's a network television deal with NBC. So all of Notre Dame's home games are televised by NBC. There's no way BYU in any universe is going to get a television package like that.
Well, wait a minute. They did. They affiliated with ESPN.
No, but that's not the same. I mean, that's
not their own network, man.
Yeah,
well, they do have their. Well, as I understand it, they do. Well, they do have their own network. They BYU TV.
Yeah, they do, but it's not equivalent to ESPN or Notre Dame
or NBC. Yeah,
I understand that, but the point is, I was about. If that's fine. I won't explain how it actually works.
Basically, the difference between having NBC and having like some kind of agreement with ESPN on how many games will be televised, we're talking several zeros.
Yeah.
Well, but it is financially it makes financial sense with BYU affiliating with ESPN because my understanding is the deal is that ESPN gets access to some of BYU's satellites and other broadcasting hardware and other things, and in exchange for that, they get they play a bunch of their games on ESPN. So there's at least a tie-in, but
the difference is if you can join the Big 12 conference, you not only get television deal Fox. You get the shared revenue with if they expand, it'll be 11 or 13 other schools that are include big revenue schools like Oklahoma in that mix. So the bottom line is BYU wants to join a conference. Sorry.
It also made more sense to join a conference once the playoff system came into place, because the major conferences have more of are able to get in more than these independents. And I think they recognize that in order to actually compete and be involved in major bowls and certainly playoffs or even hope for a chance at national title, and BYU still believes they are the elite of college football. They are among the elite. They do. They do. The school does. The fans do.
Right.
The players do. They really do think that they are on par with the USCs and the the Alabamas and these in the Ohio States. They think they are up there with them.
Well,
and so that's a big motivator too.
Well, when they first went independent, which I think is hilarious, that BYU fan was, very adamant by saying that it wasn't in response to Utah going to the Pac-12, but they're like, "Oh, we're not staying in the Mountain West either. We're going to go independent, yeah, because we're just like Notre Dame. Yeah, that's what we're going to do." Yeah. And so they did, and it didn't exactly work out the way they had initially planned for a lot of the reasons that Randy talked about. Yeah, but I think
go ahead. I was going to say, at the same time, they looked at Utah joining a big conference, a Power 5 conference like the Pac-12, and they've seen how much that's elevated their program.
Yeah, and they acted well. Okay, I shouldn't say they. A lot of BYU fans were very, very butthurt and jealous. Like, hey, how come? Because the exact reasons you stated, Matt. Because they really do think that they are the USC's, Notre Dame's of the world, and they're like, "What? How did we get overlooked? I mean, we're BYU, 1984. You guys not remember that?"
Yeah, the least deserving national champion in the history of college football.
Right.
Played the most pathetic schedule for a national champion.
Steve Young, you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they do. There is. I want to give them a little credit. So there is some. It makes some sense to go independent because they are unique in that they have fans in every state. If you're Mormon, you're a fan of BYU, and so probably unlike any other university, you have a lot of people who identify as BYU football fans who are neither from Utah and did not go to BYU, but still have BYU as one of either their favorite or their second favorite team and support them. So they do have support. They travel well, and that's why a lot of teams do like to schedule them and play them because they know that they're going to get they're going to very likely get a sold out game or very close to a sold out game.
That's probably the leading contender that I'm sure that Randy will elaborate on a little bit more is why they're even in consideration for the Big 12 is because they do travel. There's a big fan base. So
yeah, and that actually was on display this last weekend when they played University of Arizona in the Arizona Cardinal Stadium, which is in Phoenix,
right?
Which is like a couple hours north of where the University of Arizona campus is, and it was like from the account of family that were at the game, it was almost like a BYU home game.
Yeah, and that's Had it been in Tucson, it would have been different, obviously. But being in not quite Tucson, so you don't get as many U of A, the U of A fans. But it was big, and they won.
Right, and so BYU is an attractive candidate for the Big 12 to add.
BYU beat the 8th worst team in the Pac-12 currently. I think that's what they will be.
By a last-second field goal, yeah. But, BYU may not be what's, known as a college football blue blood. I mean, and there's certainly no Notre Dame who's like not only a college football institution, but kind of an American institution.
Right.
But, they do have a national championship officially. They do have a Heisman Trophy winner, Ty Detmer, 91. And they do have, kind of a interesting history under Lavelle Edwards mainly.
Sure.
That makes them appealing, not to mention the fact that Mormons all over the country will come out to watch them. So they are currently one of the finalists to be added to the Big 12, which says that they will make this decision no later than October, but maybe even before October, or at least they're going to vote on it.
Oh yeah, I heard they weren't going to make that decision until at the end of the end of the season. That wasn't going to come out during this football season. But I read that somewhere, but I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, different, sports, there's all kinds of speculation.
Sure.
An article I read quoted the Big 12 commissioner saying that they're going to have a meeting in October and may vote on it sooner.
Yeah. Now, I'll say, when Utah joined the Pac-12, I thought it would have made sense to bring Utah and BYU, to bring two other rival schools in. But I get that why it didn't make sense, because once you have Utah, you have the Utah market. You figure you have that TV market, and so then they wanted to get Colorado to kind of round out the West.
Well,
I guess, or at least the major cities in the West.
Well, in this I'm sure will open up additional conversation pieces in this, because when that happened, Utah didn't have any restrictions, didn't have any opposition to joining the Pac-12, which BYU does. It's one of the reasons why, even in this speculative moving to the Big 12, the leading contending topic of discussion is that BYU would only be a football entry,
right? That
it wouldn't be all sports on BYU because of the "we don't play on the Sunday" rule.
Yeah.
So the basketball and all of the other sports wouldn't be included, in that move. And originally, when the Utah went to the Pac-12, there was a lot of discussion about BYU being added, and that was one of the biggest cons to BYU even being considered, from what I remember.
And people never believe me when I say this, but the other piece that really cut against BYU is they were regarded as from an academic standpoint, not on the same par as the other Pac-12 schools. That was a factor that was
a factor. Okay.
It absolutely was.
Okay.
And Utah has the medical school. They have they are just from other people, like within the Pac-12 and the people in the California schools, they view BYU as not as much of a real university as the other ones in the Pac-12.
And that probably has a lot to do. I mean, it has some to do, although not all Pac-12 schools have a health campus with a medical school and a dental school and all that.
Right.
They are kind of seen as a religious school, like an extremely religious school, which handicaps a lot of the academics that come out. Like, I mean, Egyptologists and psychology and stuff like that. So I don't know. BYU is not that. I mean, Glenn, you remember when we did that podcast where we talked about the perception of BYU by Mormons, or the perception of Mormonism by Mormons, and the actual perception of the outside world.
Yeah.
There's a huge discrepancy. Like, Mormons think that they are mainstream and people think highly of them.
Right.
And then when you interview people outside of the Mormon Church, it's not so kind. I think it's the same way with the institution of BYU. Even though they do have a pretty highly ranked business and law school.
Yeah, they have some good schools. Yeah, they have some real solid academic parts of their college.
And the BYU football program is universally pretty respected, I think.
Yeah, I think if you're just talking about football quality, they do cross that barrier or meet those thresholds, whatever.
They've had some big wins.
Yeah. Now, I would love them to join any major conference. So
even if it's just football only?
Well, yes. The reason is because once they join any major conference, and I don't care what it is, they will become the most irrelevant. They will become more irrelevant than ever before, because they cannot compete day in or week in and week out with these schools where they have to play major schools.
No,
I'll
Tom,
money on that, dude.
It's actually true because of one thing: the honor code. The one time that BYU, a BYU coach tried to recruit a bunch of black athletes that are non-Mormon was Gary Croton from 2001 to 2004. And what followed was a rash of honor code violations by mostly football players, or high percentage of football players. And Gary Croton, I mean, he also didn't help himself by losing on the field, but he was fired in large part because of all of the football players that got kicked out of school. And they're just never going to be able to get the black athletes that you would need to compete, to have the depth you need to compete day in and day out in a major conference. So they will, I would predict, if they join the Big 12, they're going to get pounded into submission.
Yeah. It's one thing to get up. It's one thing to get up for one game, and BYU, when they play, they always play a couple big conference schools, a year, and for them that is their Super Bowl, and they get up, and it's they circle it on the calendar, and it's a big deal. Meanwhile, U of A, for example, they're looking at the rest of their schedule, and they have to play all these schools, the UCLAs and the USCs and the Oregons and the Stanfords.
Schedule, right.
And meanwhile, BYU is looking at U of A saying, this is our time to show people what we are. And U of A is like, we should be able to get through these guys. They're kind of that happens year in and year out where BYU jumps up and bites people once a year. But if you have to do that week in, week out, it's just not tenable. As a lot of, as an ASU Sun Devil, I know what that's like. It's not really fun.
Well,
Every
I understand.
once in a while, you have a good year. You have a good year, but it's a freaking gauntlet to go through these guys.
Right, I understand what you're saying, and I should state right out of the gate here that I do have a bias against BYU because I'm a Utah fan. But when you were talking about that, they'll become irrelevant if they get into the Big 12 or whatever, I'm not so sure that's true, only because it brings back a lot of flashbacks of when Utah went into the Pac-12. That same sort of thing was being projected onto us. Like, oh, yeah, you guys been playing in the Mountain West. Wait till you get into the Pac-12. You guys will get trampled over. You'll be lucky to walk away with 2 or 3 wins, blah, blah, blah. And we've been able to hold our own.
Well,
but you guys don't have the same recruiting impediments that all you joining the Pac-12 did is give you access to kids that you didn't otherwise have.
Agreed.
Yeah. So what's happened with
Utah, and it took you a few years.
So what's happened with Utah by joining the Pac-12, they came because there was a time.
Sorry, I'm just thinking how Bob is just rolling his eyes.
He's not listening. He's not listening.
Yeah, that's true. He'll never listen to this.
Right.
This comment will have something to do with the honor code. When Utah joined the Pac, or before Utah joined the Pac-12, they had a 12-0 season or 11-0 season, playing a really weak schedule, and then they went to the Sugar Bowl and they actually beat the crap out of Alabama. And so, before they joined the Pac-12, a team like Utah, who's in a mid-major conference, there's enough good players out there where Utah had a lot of good players on that team. But what happens when you have to play week in and week out in a tough conference is you need depth. Right. And so when Utah came into the Pac-12, they just, they did take their lumps. But each year they've gotten a little better and a little better. And what experts believe about Utah from the time they joined the conference to now is their depth on their roster is so much better. But they were able to do that, like Matt said, because they don't have the honor code as this big handicap, whereas BYU would have that if they joined the Big 12.
Yeah, but we don't have a real good way of measuring how big of an impact that would have until they get into the conference. The same way that Utah got in, because now we can look in hindsight and say, well, Utah definitely has had better recruits, better depth, and is a much stronger athletic school now because of that. But we don't know. What if BYU does get in and the honor code doesn't seem to impede them the way that we're all speculating? Maybe it will. I tend to think so. But if they get in and it doesn't, and then they hold their own, as it were, then I don't know. That's all I'm saying. It's like, maybe they might be all right. I don't know.
Yeah, but Tom, there's already evidence that I explained. In 2001 to 2004, Croton really made a concerted effort to bring in non-member black athletes. And the honor code,
blew up at him. Yeah,
it
that's
blew
fair
up on him.
Randy, the euphemism is he started recruiting speed. I think is what they say. Speed and athleticism is what.
Well, there was an article. It was what's his name? He's Mormon, former Mormon, maybe now. He was black. He was Mormon. He teaches at Wichita State. Anyway, he wrote an article showing how disproportionate people have been kicked out of BYU. How many of them are black? So,
but isn't that more a function of non-member more than race?
Well, he made it about race. The whole article was about
But I think that's more. There's a confounding variable there, which is the membership status.
And even if we don't, let's say we take race out of the equation. Even though you can look at the NFL and 99.9% of cornerbacks in the NFL are black, even if you don't make it about race, you need to recruit outside of Mormons. So they're going to need to recruit, even if, whatever color, white or whatever, they would need to recruit more non-members than they are to be able to compete at the level they need to compete in the Big 12. Right. And how are they going to compete without gay athletes?
That's a good transition.
Or more importantly, how are they going to recruit if they have any type of how are they going to recruit either non-members or black athletes that if they're viewed as a school that discriminates against any minority? And I think that is a fair issue to consider.
Okay, so I think there's a parallel to draw in the social change regarding how America views gay rights now and in the late 1960s on how race was viewed by America, and how it relates to BYU and athletics. When I was growing up, my dad always told me the reason. Or he didn't say it was the reason, but he said at one point in the 70s, Stanford refused to play BYU. And that's all I ever remember hearing was Stanford. But right. I did some research, and it's actually way more interesting of a story than that. And I'll get through it as fast as I can. Okay. So we're going back to 1968. People think this year is a crazy, insane election year. It doesn't even compare to 1968. You have one. It
doesn't even compare? Okay.
Doesn't even compare. We have the Vietnam War, hundreds of kids dying a month in Vietnam. Everyone's, the draft. You have the height of the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King is assassinated. One of the top, imagine this, if this happened today, one of the top presidential candidates in 1968 was murdered on the campaign trail, Robert Kennedy. You have protests all over the country on campuses. Kent State, 2 students are murdered are shot and killed by police at a protest on campus. It was just a time where it seemed like the end of the world in 1968. Well, black athletes started to focus on BYU that had to play BYU. And it started in 1968. 7 black members of the UTEP track team refused to compete with BYU, including Bob Beamon. And do you guys recognize the name Bob Beamon?
No.
Okay. He shattered that later that year in the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. He shattered the long jump record, and that record lasted for decades.
Oh, wow.
But he and 6 other black members of the UTEP track team refused to compete against BYU in 1968. Also in 1968, BYU was in the same conference as San Jose State at the time. 21 black players in 1968 refused to play against BYU, and the fans protested against BYU by not showing up. So BYU played San Jose State minus all their black players and still lost in front of an empty stadium.
And was that protest primarily because of the priesthood ban thing, or is it something bigger? Okay.
Yep, it was their position on blacks in the priesthood.
Right. Okay.
So 1 year later, Wyoming players, the week of the BYU game, they go to a rally headed by a mathematics doctoral candidate named Willie Black, and he inspires them to follow this lead of UTEP and San Jose State. And they ultimately, and that was the week of the BYU game, so they ultimately decide to play but wear black armbands in protest. In response, the Wyoming coach, Lloyd Eaton, total fucking asshole, kicks all 14 black players off the team. He didn't suspend them for the game. He didn't discipline them in any of that. He kicked them off the team.
Jeez.
And BYU's head coach applauded his efforts, saying he respects us. He did it because he respects us, and he's a true gentleman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he said that in 2009, when looking back. Asshole. That's why I think he's in...
He said that in 2009?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so your disclaimer of characterizing him was justified.
All right, but three of the black players were allowed to join the team the following year. But Wyoming was never the same. 2 years before that, they went to the Sugar Bowl. That year, they were undefeated before they played BYU. After that, black players would not touch Wyoming with a 10-foot pole. And they went 1-10 the next year, and the Coach Eaton got fired. 1970, the University of Arizona conducts a study on BYU campus to determine if they're racist.
Is this a true thing?
Yeah.
That is awesome. Okay.
The findings were presented the same week as the BYU Arizona game in 1970, but they found them the study found BYU to not be racist, but quote, an isolated institution whose members simply do not relate to or understand black people. And then that week, when BYU traveled to Arizona, they were met by 75 protesters that were protesting their racism. And then there's not, I looked as hard as I could, there's nothing between 70 and 78 when the priesthood ban was lifted in June of 78. But there was a West Coast faction of schools led by San Jose State, Cal Berkeley, University of Washington, and Stanford that refused to play BYU in any sport. So, and I looked, Stanford and BYU weren't in the same, obviously they weren't in the same league because Stanford was in the Pac-8 at the time, BYU was in the WAC, but Stanford and BYU never played. But the threat of these 5 schools saying they will never play them, and the idea that this might grow, I think is fair to say may have played some role in the priesthood ban being lifted in 1978.
There's wide speculation about that, yeah, and we've talked about it on the podcast before, but yeah.
And the question is, do you think we could have history repeat itself with this issue?
Well, maybe. The first problem is just what you said, or the first obstacle to it being the same thing is there are I don't know what the numbers are, what the statistics are, but there certainly are a lot more black student athletes and certainly black football players that were directly impacted and felt certainly personally slight, would have taken BYU's positions personally, obviously, than there are at least out gay football players. So if you had more gay football players that started doing what some of those other athletes do, it would be, I think it would have more impact, or likely to have more impact if they, but that doesn't mean that just the stain of that and just the idea of being progressive and looking forward and seeing that there may be consequences, boycotts, other things to your institution as a result of having BYU in your conference, that certainly may happen. And we see more and more very, very powerful companies taking positions. Apple, and I'm sure there's others. I'm thinking about Apple.
One organization that has taken a stand?
Who?
The NCAA. They pulled, I believe.
That's a good point.
They pulled the Final Four out of North Carolina.
No, you're right.
In response to their their basically, I think it was their, how they always call
religious freedom.
Yeah, they cloak bigotry, legalize bigotry as religious freedom, and here you have the NCAA who
I thought it was the NBA.
The NCAA has this quandary though because
Glenn's right. It was the
NBA. It's the All-Star game,
right?
It's the NBA All-Star game that they took away from Charlotte, North Carolina, and put it somewhere else. Anyway,
you're right. You're absolutely right on that. But I think the NCAA did the same thing.
Okay.
I have about 12 articles that I pulled up, and I'm not going to try to find it now.
I was with Glenn as well. When he said that was my memory as well.
Well, the NCAA champions anti-discrimination, and but at the same time, they also champion religious freedom. So they're kind of, in a quandary as it pertains to dealing with BYU's explicit anti-gay laws or rules on the campus. I mean, I read in one of the articles that you can be a professor at BYU, you can be a student, and be gay as long as you practice chastity. But that's not true, because the Mormon law of chastity doesn't prohibit holding hands, hugging, and kissing.
Right. Any public display. Right.
Right. But if you're homosexual, you cannot hold hands, hug, or kiss.
Right.
Someone of the same sex.
Yeah, that's very specifically stated in the honor code. Yeah.
Right. So, the NCAA doesn't want to touch BYU. But at the same time, they try to promote their anti-discrimination things in other ways that they can. But I think you're right, Matt. The number of black players that are athletes, is completely dwarfs the number of gay players.
Yeah, and I think to go along that same line of thinking, I think we're still really, really early as far as being universally accepting of all homosexuals openly. There's still a lot of people that are closeted, and I assume that that's the same with student athletes. If and when, I guess it's not if, it's when there's going to be a lot more openly gay student athletes, whether it's football, basketball, or whatever. As soon as they don't feel like they need to stay in the closet, they can be open about it, and there's a wide acceptance of it, then we're going to start to see the chips fall. And that's where I think the comparison of what's happening today going to be the same thing, as a parallel as to what happened back in the 60s and 70s.
Well, the numbers will never be the same, though, because, approximately 10% of the population is gay.
Yeah.
Whereas in college football, well over 50% of
it won't be the same,
of the Power 5 conferences are black. But that's why I think the pressure needs to come from places like what we're talking about today, which is a letter that a bunch of gay right activists groups signed, and one of them wrote to the Big 12 commissioner. And we don't have time to get into why the Big 12 has 10 teams. I'm not going to get into that history. But a letter to all the presidents of the 10 universities discouraging them from adding BYU. And currently the Big 12 has 10 teams, but 2 of them are Christian schools. Right. You got Texas Christian University, TCU, and you got Baylor, which is a Baptist university.
Right.
And TCU is a little bit more liberal. They do have anti-LGBT discrimination verbiage in their code of conduct. Baylor took a couple of words out to make it look like.
Yeah, they softened the wording.
They softened the wording. They removed homosexuality. But they also have, in another part of their bylaws, that marriage is between one man and one woman. So they have schools, they have religious schools, but they are further down the road as far as social acceptance of homosexuality. These Christian schools are way further along than BYU. I mean, BYU, it's outright hostility. No matter how much they smile and how much they say they accept you, if you're a student, they don't accept you.
Well, is now a good time to ask the speculative question that if BYU were to either soften or eliminate the honor code, would this change everything?
What do you mean?
I think it could, but they're never going to do it. I mean, that's like saying no. That's like saying if they could start painting the sky purple or something. I don't.
No, soften the honor code to at least the anti-gay rhetoric that's in it.
I think it would go a long ways to getting them added. I just don't think they're willing to do that because this is the hill they want to die on. I used to think there was hope if people, that Mormon Pride trailer that I was a little too prominently featured in. I mentioned that.
Plug. Right.
That's right. And I mentioned that. I said, "Oh yeah, if people stop playing BYU, that could really have impact on their decisions." I believed that when I was interviewed for that. I don't know that I do. I think they're willing. I think they're willing to take their lumps on this one.
Yeah, it cuts too close to the core of the church. I mean, their whole families are forever thing. Puts on a pedestal this perfect family of man and a woman and happy, obedient kids. And Matt, you just sent me a text.
Yeah, I sent you BYU's response to that letter.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go through the letter.
So let's go through the letter.
Let's go through
the letter and BYU's response.
Okay.
Glenn, why don't you start?
All right, Big 12 Conference Letter, August 8th, 2016. Dear Commissioner Bowlesby, we are writing to express our concerns about Brigham Young University's candidacy for Big 12 Conference membership. As organizations committed to ending homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, both on and off the field of play, we are deeply troubled by this possibility. We feel it would be extremely problematic to include BYU in your conference expansion for the following reasons. Adding BYU would be inconsistent with Big 12 conference membership values. Do you want me to keep going? I'll keep going. Currently, the Big 12 as a conference is overwhelmingly LGBT inclusive. 9 out of 10 of your member schools have explicit protections for students based on their sexual orientation. 8 out of 10 of your member schools have explicit protections for students based on their gender identity. And 9 out of 10 of your member schools have LGBT resource centers to proactively make their schools safe and welcoming for LGBT people. BYU, conversely, actively and openly discriminates against its LGBT students and staff. It provides no protections for LGBT students. In fact, through its policies, BYU is very clear about its intent to discriminate against openly LGBT students, with sanctions that can include suspension or dismissal for being openly LGBT or in a same-sex relationship. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah, he's talking about their own his own BYU's own students. Yes.
Yeah, but
what?
I thought you could be gay but not act gay.
I think what openly means is being gay.
Yeah, it's like holding hands.
Not just standing there being gay.
Not saying I have SSA.
That guy's not my roommate.
Yeah, but if you had a student at BYU that was openly gay, but was saying, "Look, I'm gay. This is my orientation, but this is the commandments that we shouldn't have sex before marriage, so I'm celibate." Who's that? I don't know. There's people like this. I can't remember their names.
Was it the Josh Weed dude?
I don't. Well, no, I was thinking of somebody different. But if you had somebody like that they're openly gay, they wouldn't be dismissed or suspended or punishment. It's So I just think that this sentence is a little bit misleading. But
well, I think the word openly implies that they would be acting on it at least publicly. Not having intercourse publicly, but you know what I'm saying. Like they would be able to hold hands. They could be together.
It's just one of those things where like hyperbole bugs me. Even if they're exaggerating a valid point, it's that space between where the validness ends and the hyperbole continues. That just annoys me. I'm like, trim off the fat.
I don't think so, Glenn, because this isn't written by a Mormon. Like he doesn't speak Mormon language.
Of course, they're not. What does what I just say have to do anything to do with Mormonism?
No, I think it does.
Openly gay means you're just honest about it. Whereas the rest of the world, openly gay means you're gay and you act gay by, having what a normal human being has, which is a sexual aspect to your life, and you're openly gay by having a boyfriend, kissing him, holding his hand.
Yeah, I think this is hyperbole, and it kind of like reduces the.
That's coming.
credibility to me.
I do think that's that what you're describing, Glenn. I had similar reactions to in a little later in the letter. I think they're actually trying to be fair to BYU here and trying to be very precise. Because openly, I think I agree with Randy that openly LGBT or in a same-sex relationship means something to the author of this letter, and they're trying to capture exactly what BYU's policies are, and I think they've done it. But there is this other nuance that you point out of, well, I can say I'm gay, and that makes me open, that makes me out, but I will clarify that I will never act on it and do not act on it to any degree. So I do think that is a unique Mormonized version of what openly gay means.
Yeah, I mean,
are there not, like at BYU right now, LGBT groups that meet and that it's okay for them to meet?
It's a good question. I don't know.
I think there are. I know that a friend of mine, and we've had him on the podcast before, Adam Fisher, was at BYU after he got his dissertation or after he got his PhD, and he did a year at BYU, and he was counseling LGBT youth, and there were definitely problems with the way that counseling happened, and the things that he was able to say and wasn't able to say. But just the fact that someone was openly gay in and of itself didn't lead to any dismissals or suspensions. So anyway, I can see what they're doing here. They're setting up a compare and contrast style essay where they bring up these different points, and they say on the one hand this is the good, and then on the other hand this is the bad. And I just think it's, I don't know. It seems unnecessary to exaggerate, because the truth by itself.
I don't think
they're not exaggerating.
Yeah, they're not exaggerating.
Because I bet if you go to BYU right now, you'll find some openly LGBT students that haven't been disciplined or suspended.
And that's good because they can't even hold hands with someone they love.
I'd like to know if that's true. I'd like to know if it's true that there are people who are truly openly gay.
I would say honestly gay. They're just honest that they are attracted to the same sex, but they're not openly living free. It's not. It feels like, I know you're not doing this, Glenn, but it almost feels like you're saying, hey, yay for BYU for not kicking people out just because they admit that they're attracted to the same sex, while at the same time oppressing them if they try to.
I'm not. I'm picturing my daughter Shaylee, who is like she would definitely be one of the people, or on the side of the people that are writing a letter like this, and she has a tendency to exaggerate, and I'm always telling her, knock it off with the exaggeration. Just stick with the facts themselves are damning enough, so you don't need to exaggerate it, because when you get to people that are going to be defensive about it anyway, and they see that you're exaggerating, then they just, I'm not going to listen to the rest of this, because this is already misrepresenting the situation. And so it's way too easy to dismiss it, and it doesn't make it a very strong, compelling argument. So that's why I'm saying that.
This is kind of a form of a straw man, and they would be better off creating a steel man. Is that right?
This is a steel man with a little bit of straw on the outside of it.
I actually don't think that it's a level of exaggeration. I think using the word openly is okay in this context, because if you were living in an openly heterosexual relationship, I would assume that would mean that you could act on your feelings or your relationship
at least
openly.
Date, right? I mean, you at least get to date.
No, that's a good point. It is,
and hold hands with a person. To me, that's what my mind always goes to.
Yeah.
If you're in a relationship with someone, just the restriction that you cannot hold hands with your partner, that person that you're in a relationship with, on campus is restrictive, and I think it's unfair. And that's why
or even be in a non-sexual relationship,
right?
As a BYU student, you could not say, "Hey, we date, we maintain standards, but we do not engage in homosexual, homosexual sex versus other sex." But
they consider holding hands homosexual sex.
I'll finish this paragraph and then punt it to the next point. So,
but it's a good setup, Glenn, because I think what you're saying they did with that, they do they do pretty egregiously coming up.
Okay. The LGBT climate is so bad at BYU that it is ranked the 6th worst school in the country for LGBT students.
Don't you want to know what the other 5 that are worse?
Oh, they're all like Jerry Falwell universities, like Liberty.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how they score that, but
Right. That's the other question. Yeah.
Fundamentalist Christian universities, I guarantee you, are the top 5 fundamentalist Christians.
It's also they're ranked the 6th worst schools in the country for LGBT students by us.
Yeah.
Who's the measurement there?
Yeah.
It was a survey of LGBT students.
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going, Matt.
Given
shut up.
BYU's homophobic, biphobic, and transphobic policies and practices, BYU should not be rewarded with Big 12 membership.
All right, we should probably just keep going. Tom?
So this is the next point.
Okay. BYU's anti-LGBT policies are bad for the Big 12 sports community, especially student athletes. The Big 12 is known for its dedication to its sports community, fans, coaches, staff, and players, etc., and its commitment to the welfare of its student athletes. BYU's membership to the Big 12 would jeopardize both. First, LGBT coaches, players, and fans who attend and or compete at any Big 12 events hosted at BYU would be subject to discrimination since BYU remains exempt from Utah's LGBT non-discrimination law.
Okay. This is where I'm calling bullshit. I'd like to know in what way they foresee. So this is to me this letter, the LGBT groups that are writing this are doing the same thing that the church did on Prop 8. If you let this happen, let me tell you all of the horrible things that will happen.
Slippery slope arguments.
And that's what they're doing here. I would like to have somebody articulate better in what way a fan, an LGBT fan that goes to a game, in what way they will be discriminated against.
I'll give you an example.
No, okay. Maybe I just haven't conceived of it.
What happens if some Oklahoma State? I'm trying to pick a state that would be more likely to have gay people. What if an Oklahoma State?
How about any of them?
I know. What if an Oklahoma fan and a man and their husband walk into the stadium holding hands, and then when they sit in the stands, they kiss every time Oklahoma scores a touchdown on BYU.
Uh-huh.
The kiss cam.
Nothing would kiss cam. Nothing would happen to a heterosexual couple that did a peck on the lips. This happened in Dodger Stadium like 15 years ago. A lesbian couple were kicked out of Dodger Stadium. It might have been 20 years ago. But that was a long time ago. But what happens at Cougar State, at Lavelle Edwards Stadium, if this kind of behavior happens at the game? And let's say they're legally and lawfully married. Yeah. They're like a couple.
Oh, look, I would predict BYU would do nothing.
Wait. Okay, but they're not saying BYU, but would they be subject to discrimination?
That's what being kicked out is, the discrimination they'd be subject to.
I'm saying I don't believe that BYU. I believe they would be they could be subject to discrimination by other people and by other fans, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Nah, I think it's all encompassing.
Because you can get the same thing at any university. You can get that at one of the most liberal schools you go to. You could get some jack off that's in the stands that sees that and starts disgust.
No.
Well, whatever.
I'm not talking about harassment from the fans. I'm talking about like being kicked out of the stadium. What you're saying is you don't think that would happen.
That's right. But I agree with you. If that happened, that would be a major problem.
I think
for the conference, and that would create that would just have all types of consequences.
I don't think it would have as many consequences as you might think. I also think that it's entirely possible that would happen. I have no problem with this statement.
Yeah, I mean there was
no. I'm saying it would cause problems to the Big 12 if they were added, and that did happen.
Possibly.
I think they would absolutely cause problems. I think it would be. I mean, especially with this preemptive move by these LGBT activists, warning them, don't do this or this will happen, and then it happens. The news will be all over that.
Potentially, yeah.
So I just because I was thinking about this, Matt. I'm like, what does that look like? It's not like gay people have a big sign on their head, right? And that what, they're not going to be allowed to buy a Diet Coke because they have a lisp or something. But then I thought, well, what about a married couple that are legally married, that are homosexual, and they act like married couples do, holding hands and hugging and kissing when your team scores a touchdown. If not being harassed by fans, but if they were kicked out, I guess I disagree with Tom that it wouldn't be a problem, but I disagree with Matt, or I agree with Tom and disagree with Matt that I think it's possible.
Yeah.
What do you think, Glenn?
Glenn had to jump off for a few minutes.
Oh.
Should we just keep?
All right. Well, I
think it.
I guess I was being too charitable to BYU. I was thinking there's no way that at a non-student, right, someone from another school, opposing fan, that they just wouldn't take action.
Why are you giving so much slack to BYU for this? Because I don't know. I guess
because
to
I
me,
think they're very good at control. I think this is going to sound stupid, as it's formulated in my head, I get how stupid it's going to sound, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Great disclaimer.
Because they are very good at controlling others, but yet not trying to control people, their own members and people that they have control over, like the BYU students. But I think they would allow others that are not part of the institution to be. And I get it, because they work so hard in trying to prevent other people who aren't members from having rights. I get the ridiculousness of that, but there is a part of me that believes, not part, I really do believe that as an institution they wouldn't cross that line because they are more politically savvy than that.
Well, here's another scenario I thought of that's more extreme. Let's say we got a gay couple and they are dead set on getting kicked out. And so they show up wearing really short shorts and a really tight tank top, and they're holding hands.
And they're on the field.
And they're all in
hands.
The tank top and the short shorts are all in rainbow colors, but they're wearing an Oklahoma hat.
Hey, does dress code does that dress code stuff get enforced at the games?
I have no idea. I asked my little brother about that, and he had no idea either.
It's a gray area.
Yeah.
Huh. I hadn't even thought of that because you go to the ASU or the USC games,
they're like half naked.
Oh gosh, yeah. The co-eds are just like it's almost shocking. And I'm no prude, man.
No, it's wonderful. I mean, it's a gift from God.
Yeah, right.
Oh, jeez.
I'm a big fan. Don't get me wrong.
And the angels sing. Yeah.
Yes, the angels were singing in my head.
Yeah. Well, the move now is to for the girls to get the t-shirts, like a guy's t-shirt, and then to make the neckline, cut the neckline, and to make it like a halter top thing, and to like tie the arms around, and it becomes just the shortest, dress. Oh, so the whole t-shirt is all they're wearing, and it's like barely above the chest to just at the crotch level, man. It's
all right. Well, dress code aside, what if they're dressed in like all rainbow and gay pride on both sides of their shirt, and they're hugging, holding hands, kissing every touchdown, actually trying to agitate people,
like really doing things to be to protest,
yeah, but really just doing normal couple things if they were heterosexual, right. but still making a big point to look at me, we're gay. Do something about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you see that being a possibility?
Yeah, but when it comes to an opposing team's fans, man, I don't know that they'd have the balls to do anything. I think they would see. I've repeated myself. It's a fair point, and if that's a real risk, then I don't have as much of a quarrel with this statement as I originally did. I thought they were over. I thought they were basically articulating a slippery slope that may not be as even real possible.
Well,
but
and one of the big reasons why I don't give them a lot of slack, Matt, is because I've seen BYU and or the church step in it time and time again, And it's like, why can't they just do the right thing for a change? And they do occasionally. They're very diplomatic in certain circumstances, but they step in it a lot, man.
Well, they mentioned one of the diplomatic things that they did. The LDS Church supported an anti-discrimination law for jobs and housing,
right,
in Utah, but they put in words in there to explicitly protect religious institutions.
So that's really what they're trying to do. The point that they're making here is that don't buy in they're going to say that Utah has anti-discrimination laws. Don't buy into that, Big 12, because BYU is exempt from that. I think that's the purpose of this. So that's a good move.
But that's just another. I mean, because what in the past few years, Matt, has given you confidence that BYU will do the right thing? This is like the one right thing that they always point to, that all members point to, but they still did it with their self-interest, tucked into it.
That's very true. The thing that makes me believe that they wouldn't is because it is football. I think they recognize what the precipice that they're on, and if they do make wrong moves, they've gotten drilled over and over again with the politics that they've advanced, and if they do it with an opposing fan at a football game, yeesh, that was a Tom right there. Yeesh. It's gonna. There
would be a lot of egg on their face. No.
Yeah. Well, the next point is actually, I think, a little bit implausible. So I'll continue on since I know where we left off. Moreover, any student athlete who identifies as LGBT and subsequently selects BYU due to its Big 12 membership would be subjected to BYU's unabashed discrimination. This would endanger the student athlete's NCAA eligibility and mental health. The Big 12 sports community, especially its student athletes, deserve better than this.
Well, wait a minute.
So
What's your
to me,
beef
it's
with
like my beef is like what someone who's LGBT. I guess okay. So I just thought of a different scenario. What if an athlete chooses BYU and doesn't know they're gay, and they went there and then they figure out they're gay maybe their junior year? Mm-hmm. Now they're stuck in this mire of bigotry. I was thinking, because the only way I was thinking of it before was that they knew they were gay. Why in the hell would you ever accept a scholarship to BYU? But so often it happens that people don't know they're gay until they're in college. So I was gonna have a problem with that part, and now I don't.
You talked yourself out of it.
I had a problem with the first one, and you guys have brought me back around a little bit. But this one I absolutely see that as a real concern.
But I also think that they are reaching a little bit. But I don't have a problem with the hyperbolic kind of approach to this letter, because they are trying to raise eyebrows. They are trying to make a statement. That's why even when Glenn said originally, like, why exaggerate, blah, blah, blah. It's like they're trying to make a statement that's very, very important to a lot of people. That's the whole point.
But if you can swat it down and you can demonstrate it as being just rhetorical rather than real concerns, they lose credibility and then it falls on.
Yeah, but they're not.
I don't see that. I don't see that here. And first of all,
I'm just defending Glenn with when I know,
but I think where Glenn's mistake is he's thinking he's worried about Mormons reading this and just waving their hand. But this isn't intended for a Mormon audience.
True.
This is intended for non-Mormons.
Right.
And it's a political move, and I don't think that they've overstated that much, or if at all, in any of the stuff. All these things, like we've shown, there are scenarios where this could happen,
right?
And I think it's a really I think it's a great move by this organization.
It is. It was a very good move. But I think what Glenn was talking about, since he's not here, was worrying about the Big 12 people, the commission, or the commissioner and the people on the board, those presidents would look at this and say, Yeah, they've overreached. They've misstated.
I just because I don't think they're familiar enough with the Mormon distinction about being openly gay. Versus...
I agree with that. I agree with that piece. I was more concerned with, that they're going to enact some of their discriminatory policies at a public football game where somebody bought a freaking ticket. I mean, that's where it starts bleeding. It starts bleeding into. There's real issues there, and I do think BYU is on the verge of. Well, hell, they were investigated by. Was it the bar? Wasn't the federal? It was the law school, right? About the way that they that their policies were implemented, and they softened them as a result of that. So these
is that over the rape allegations, the honor code? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I think it was about the people that
reported sexual abuse.
People leave the church and then are subject to discipline. They soften that, so you now can leave the church and still stay at. So they softened it just a bit. So that's related to the religious liberty is part of that is people can also leave your church and have their own religious liberty and their own religious freedom, and you can't discipline them because there was real risk of being some consequences related to that, and so they were forced to soften that. And this could, but I think this could be. Those steps that have been taken where they recognize that they've got to be cautious, and I'm one that does believe that BYU's that either their accreditation or their ability to get tied into federal funding, student loan, or federal funding for the university is in jeopardy the more they advance these policies.
Well, I have a legal question for you that's coming up in the next two paragraphs, Matt, and I guess does somebody have something to say?
No, I was just going to say I actually haven't read the BYU's response to this, so let's try to finish this up.
Okay, let's push through. Where are we?
BYU's anti-LGBT policies.
Oh, BYU's anti-LGBT policies violate both Big 12 guidelines and NCAA guidelines. All Big 12 member schools have to comply with NCAA guidelines. The NCAA requires schools to comply with Title IX. As an institution that openly discriminates against transgender students, BYU is not in compliance with Title IX. As such, it not only violates NCAA's membership guidelines, but it also violates the Big 12's commitment to gender equality. And I don't know if that's true.
So because Title IX was written without any thought of transgenders.
True.
So I'm wondering how that can be, if they accidentally put words in there that could be interpreted as covering transgender.
I'm certainly not a Title IX expert. Generally, you're right. Title IX relates to females in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
But it really relates to equality of students. So men can also advance a Title IX claim. I am talking out of my ass here. This is not Matt the lawyer. This is Matt the infant. I certainly could conceive of a scenario or of an argument where Title IX is triggered by certain discriminatory practices against, transgender students. So, but I don't know. I don't know. Dude, Title IX is, as I've started to delve into it a little bit on a couple cases that I'm involved in. It's a interesting animal. I mean, it's a different thing.
Okay, that's fair enough. Don't talk in areas that you're not sure about, especially as a lawyer. But if anyone out there wants to
educate us
on how BYU's discrimination to transgenders applies to Title IX, I would love for it to be that way. Anyway, the Big 12 is a conference committed to sportsmanship, fair play, and inclusion both on and off the playing field. You are known for your dedication to fans and your commitment to the welfare of your student athletes. Adding a school like BYU to your membership while it still champions anti-LGBT policies and practices would greatly undermine these Big 12 values. Sincerely, like 20-something.
Yeah, and there are some that really stand out that are, you got GLAD.
Yeah.
You've got, I mean, there's a lot of these that I just don't know how much impact these organizations have, or how much influence. You have the National Organization for Women certainly does.
National Center of Lesbian Rights, National Center for Transgender Equality. But then there's just a shit ton of like local organizations.
Yep.
Right.
So
wait,
Tom,
sorry, real quick, did we cover that paragraph where they talk about like 9 of the 10 schools currently and 8 of the 10 schools currently? Did we blow through that? Did I just miss that?
Well, I already gave background on which schools are
okay. Yeah, no, and that piece of it, I think they lose a little bit of. It'd be one thing if it was 10 out of 10, but if there are 2 students that don't have, or 2 schools that don't have some of those things, then it's hard to say, yeah, keep them out because they have similar standards as only 1 or 2 of your other schools. But
yeah, it's Baylor is one of the 2 on all 3 examples. TCU is one of the 2, I think, on transgender. But you're right. It would have been so much better if they could have said 10 out of 10. But 8 out of 10, I believe, are state schools. And of course, since they're government schools, they have explicit language banning discrimination. But I want to let's get to Matt's link and have Tom start us off.
I don't have the link. Is this the BYU response?
Yeah, I sent it to you, dude.
On my phone?
It's your text. It's a text, yeah.
Oh.
Because I'm dying to hear how the church responded to it.
Yeah, so am I. This is on LDS Living?
yes.
Deseret News?
Yes. Well, they just published the response. Did you got it, dude?
Yeah, BYU's response after 25 LGBT groups criticized BYU in letter to Big 12. Let's see. With the big, is this
the letter? That's not the letter. Where's the letter, Matt?
Yeah, no. Here's BYU's response, and then
where is this at? Am I looking in the wrong place?
Right, yeah, you're there where it says where the italicized paragraph is just kind of a it's almost like the scriptures where they have
chapter heading.
Chapter heading.
It's what's coming up.
Hey, I got to pause for a second. I'm getting a call from Scotty that I gotta take for a second. So proceed.
By the way, Tom.
Yeah.
This is not much of a response. It's a tweet.
Is it the Tom Homo one?
Yeah, it's just a tweet.
Yeah, it's okay. So
I thought we were gonna get an actual like.
So did I. I was like, this is gonna be epic. But yeah, if he just did it in 140 characters. So all right. So from Tom Homo, LGBT players, coaches, and fans are always welcome to BYU campus. Everyone should be treated with respect, dignity, and love. Tom, that's it, right?
That's it.
Oh my gosh! You know what's funny about that is. It is a very dismissal sort of response. Like, no, man, we encourage and love all. Well, that's the problem.
That's what they always do. That's like the whole love the sinner, hate the sin. That Mormons are just nothing if not polite.
Well, it's a very diversionary response where it's like, policy, what policy? Honor code, what honor code? It's like, no, we love gays. Come on over.
You could be openly gay, which means apparently you just admit you're gay, but don't do anything about it.
Even Matt on Infants on Thrones said that we are, that nothing will happen to them if they hold hands or whatever. And it's going to be fine. Just come on over. We love you guys. If people look at you weird, that's their fault. It's not BYU or the church.
You want to know? You want to know how this letter even got on my radar?
How?
So my little brother, who's still a devout Mormon, and a big BYU fan.
Okay, yeah.
Let's see. It was a text exchange 2 days ago, or it might have been yesterday. He said that the Big 12 is treating, this addition of teams as if it's an episode of The Bachelor. and so I said, "Who will get the white rose?" I'm not even sure that's the right color for The Bachelor. I've never seen it, but
I've never seen it either.
Who will get the white rose? And he says, "Not BYU if LGBT activists have their way."
Oh.
And then I said, "What do you mean?" He says they sent a letter full of fear-mongering nonsense.
Fear-mongering nonsense? That's what he says?
Yes. My brother's response was they sent a letter full of fear-mongering nonsense, and I said, "I'll have to read it." And he said, "The gist is they say Big 12 student athletes that visit BYU for games, tourneys that are LGBT will be discriminated against." So he only focused on just that one point, like opposing fans that come or athletes that come that are openly gay will somehow be discriminated against. And I think Matt agreed with him at first.
Essentially, yeah, because he was saying, no, BYU, they wouldn't act on it. They wouldn't actually kick him out or anything like that, which is probably true, but I still think it's plausible that they could.
Yeah, and I guess because the lesbian couple that got kicked out of Dodger Stadium like 20 years ago, which was a huge scandal for the Dodgers. But remember, it's 20 years ago. The reason they were kicked out was because enough fans around them complained about their behavior of hugging, kissing, and arms around each other.
Again, who would complain about that? But yeah, go on.
I don't know. It don't make no sense to me. So it's conceivable to me that enough people would go to security and complain that these two guys or these two girls, but more likely people are more grossed out by two guys,
right?
For some reason, these two guys are being inappropriate and not in line with our standards. If enough of them complained, I could see BYU security coming up, giving them a warning, and then them getting pissed off and continuing the behavior after they leave, and then they come back and said, "We warned you. You guys got to go."
Right, and it could just be one fan that's a high-paying donor that's in the VIP section or Cougar Club section. They could say, "There's two gay guys down there, and they've been holding hands and kissing during halftime. I don't appreciate it." And because of his, prestige or status or whatever, I think that security would probably be like, "Yeah, okay, we'll take care of it." Mr. Anderson that donates millions of dollars, okay, yeah, we'll take care of it.
Right. That's another scenario I didn't even think of, because they're sitting in their air-conditioned little perch with the glass wall, but they can see right down, and if there's someone like 10, 12 rows in front of them.
How am I supposed to enjoy this game when there's gays down there kissing?
Do something about those poops.
I can't watch the pass when there's gays kissing down there.
This is football. God damn it. Well, they would say, "God damn it. Gosh darn it."
Yeah, right. I got to get home early to the bishopric meeting. I think it's hilarious, because I hear a lot about this Big 12 speculation talk or whatever. And even recently, one of the local journalists actually asked the current head coach, Sataki, I think, and said, what are your thoughts about the Big 12 speculation? He's like, I don't think about that, and I don't want to talk about that. And I prefer the fans not talk about it and think about it either, because we got to take it week by week, blah, blah, blah. And then I find it interesting that so many fans are so wrapped up into this, and there's even a Facebook page that I saw that has, it's like close to 20,000 members or likes or whatever about BYU joining the Big 12. So BYU fan is very, very anxious for this to happen because they want to be legitimized.
It's been rubbed in their face for how many years now, Utah fans. You can't see, you drive through Salt Lake City, and you can't see like a Utah football banner or poster or anything that doesn't say Pac-12.
Right.
And it's been rubbed in their face for year after year. We're in the Big 12 or the Pac-12, and you couldn't get in. Fuck you.
Okay, maybe that's not the message, but that's the indirect message, I suppose.
No, I think that's the obsession why they want to get in the Big 12 is they're so sick of Utah rubbing it in their face that they're in a Power 5 conference. And they're just floating around as independents playing whoever they can.
Savannah State and Eastern Washington. Yeah, I just think it's funny because to me it's like, well, okay, Cougar fan, you remember when we went to the Pac-12 and you guys were fine, that's no problem. We're fine where we're at. And better yet, we're going to go independent. So eat that, Utah. And then they just touted their horn, just like what Matt was saying, like, well, they got ESPN on board, so that's equivalent to what Notre Dame has with the NBC
compared to Notre Dame.
Right. I know, but that's the delusional kind of rhetoric that you're hearing from Cougar fan, which just drives me crazy. Like, it's not the same, and it doesn't really matter how many times I've said it or I hear it. It just doesn't change the delusional stuff that comes from them. And now it all comes around. Now there's a possibility that they could get into a big conference. And now all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we could be just like them. And I've always had a problem with it just being a football only entry. I don't know. That really bothers me because it's like, oh, BYU basketball? Yeah, sorry, stay in the WAC, you guys, or WCC or whatever.
Well, the reason why they would take that deal is football makes all the money that funds all the other sports.
It does.
It's a deal that makes sense for BYU.
So, but doesn't BYU they're already in a conference for all the other sports now, right?
Yeah, the West Coast Conference.
So they would be in the Big 12. They would be in the Big 12 for football and the West Coast for every other sport.
Right. Yeah.
That's like, stupid.
It's the biggest FU to every other sport.
Notre Dame is independent in football, but they're in the Big East in every other sport.
No, but that's I see that different.
Big difference.
Yeah, that's just like BYU's. They can go independent all they want. And I will say, I think they need to join a conference because their stance on the LGBT issue, while being independent, will, I believe, cause schools to stop playing them and stop.
So why do you want?
They're incredible. Well, they're incredibly vulnerable if they're independent because everyone can just eventually. Because I started my history with blacks in the priesthood in '68. It took 10 years, even with that issue.
Right, that's
as volatile as it was. It took 10 years for them to remove that policy.
Right.
And the United States as a whole is not nearly as united on the LGBT issue as they were in the '70s. For Christ's sake, '75 on equal rights. But as an independent. They have to fill a 12 game schedule with people that have to agree to play them. If they're in a conference, they'll have 8 guaranteed games.
Right.
So to be independent and to have this position, they're actually more vulnerable to being locked out of any kind of reasonable schedule.
I guess my question is why is that a problem again? I don't have a problem with it because I kind of like.
It's not a problem. We're just stating the way it is.
Right. Because I don't have a problem if BYU shoots themselves in their own foot. It's like, hey, that's fine.
Dude, are you guys playing them this week?
Yeah. This is going to be the return of the rivalry because
the Holy War.
It's back.
I'm glad they're doing that. That was kind of shitty that they weren't.
Why?
Well, I think rivalries are meaningful, and that was a good one.
Yeah, it is, and it was, but I don't know. This is the Utah fan in me. It's like when we just couldn't do it. I really did feel like Utah was essentially going to BYU. Like we're just gonna have to see other people. We're kind of playing with the big boys now. We really don't want to play a team that's going to, weaken our strength of schedule.
It was the opposite, dude. They're going to the Pac-12 knowing they have eight tough games, and they wanted a softer non-conference schedule.
And they should take it.
I don't know about that.
Well, dude, if I'm Utah, I want to make sure I get wins in my non-conference, man.
Absolutely. So what's Southern Utah doing right now? Let's play Southern. Let's replace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go the Ohio State route and play like nobody except for the couple people in your conference.
Yeah, Ohio State. They love playing the MAC in preseason.
Oh, by the way,
Any Ohio school.
Yeah, yep,
condolences
Youngstown
to-
State.
my deepest condolences, Randy, to the USC fans out there. Oof, that was rough.
Yeah, it's even more rough when you spend thousands of dollars and witness it with your entire family.
Yeah, you guys should be going to therapy right now as recovery. That's rough.
See, I stopped watching it when it was still competitive, dude, and I was like, oh, let's check that score. Oh no,
Yikes! Yeah.
Did you guys go when I was off? Did you guys go through the whole response? It was pretty quick.
There was nothing.
It was a tweet.
They didn't really say anything. Yeah, I know. Well, you're welcome to. Well, but that I realized it really didn't say anything. Well, of course, LGBT players, coaches, and fans are welcome to come to BYU. I mean, you can physically be here. We won't stop you.
Yeah, he should have also
Unless,
said, I can't promise you won't be discriminated against, but it's pretty unlikely.
So the only other beef I have with BYU is their complete overuse of the redshirt system and the
Are you serious?
and the mission coupled with the mission thing. The fact that they have a
26-year-old quarterback.
26-year-old quarterback is bullshit. And here's what I would say.
The number one pick in the NFL was Jared Goff from Cal, a quarterback. He's 5 years older than Jared Goff, who plays for the Rams.
And where it really
fair, man.
And I did. Do you guys remember? We never did the episode, but it was a couple years ago where I broke down the number of linemen that go on missions versus the number of skill players that go on missions, and it was really significant. I mean, it was so they do use it. So the other thing I calculated, I got to pull that spreadsheet up.
No,
I calculated.
don't put it up. It doesn't sound exciting.
Oh, shut up, Tom.
It's true. For an offensive lineman, you want a man, like a fully developed man.
But what you also found is there were a disproportionate number of linemen that went to stateside or some first world country versus third world country. So it was interesting to see how few linemen went to a third world country.
Oh, this sounds like the making of a conspiracy theory, dude.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you, I believe that is intentional.
It's just he's just giving the facts, man. He's just giving the numbers.
Well, when I went on my mission, I obviously went to the Marshall Islands. I've talked about that, Micronesia, Guam. I had a scholarship to play football at a very small school and a junior college. And they were going to let me go on my mission. They came back. In fact, they wanted that because they probably figured, well, he'll come back at 21 as a freshman, and then he'll redshirt. So they were doing the same thing with at that level. No, okay. I know they were because we had this freaking conversation. Because I was a small lineman. I was 5'10", 210 as a lineman. I thought to get a scholarship even to a junior college as a center at that size was pretty good.
I also think it's pretty impressive you got that ego into a uniform, but go on.
What? Dude, you can't see my face right now, but I'm giving you face. But then I come back. I'm 165 pounds when I come back, right? But one of my closest friends in high school was John Tate, name dropper.
Okay, yeah.
And he was. I mean, he was one of my closest friends growing up, and we left on our mission within a few months of one another. And I went to one of our lineman coach, who was a teacher at the school, and told him, "Hey, I'm going on my mission. Here's where I'm going." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Oh, Micronesia, Guam." And all he starts doing is just laughing. He just says, John Tate goes to Knoxville, Tennessee, and they send your dumbass to Micronesia, Guam. Saying the BYU knows what they're doing, basically.
Okay.
They're having their big football player, go to Knoxville, Tennessee, where he can eat all the Southern food that he wants.
He can still work out.
Has access to a gym every day.
Right.
Whether that's true or not, but there is something to be said for that. So that's my other beef with BYU is they should not get to redshirt in addition to the 2 years at the very least.
The only reason why I scoff at that is because Utah doesn't have exactly the same number of of players that have that problem, but we do have quite a few return missionaries.
Yes, you do. And Utah was on my list, so it was actually. Yeah, no, we had, because BYU or the church did a thing on the number of football players, active football players that are that are return missionaries, and that was the basis for what I looked at. And so you had one at Oregon, you had one here and there, but Utah and BYU certainly benefited from the most. But what's shitty, and this is the part that I think they need to look into, is the number of that if a kid gets a scholarship, commits to a school, they go to a school, they leave from that school. Let's say they leave from Utah and go on a mission, they can come back, go to BYU, and there's no penalties, no sit-outs whatsoever. And you have a number of kids that have done that. Either started at Utah State, started at Utah, in some cases were at Oregon and some major schools, and then go on their mission, and then they come back to BYU. And I do think that's a problem, that it does not give that if you go on a mission, you have the same restriction, or you don't have the same restrictions of staying with the school or having to sit out a year and not play if you don't. Now, I understand the argument against that the claim is a mission is actually an impediment to athletics and to
because they can't work out and they got a crazy diet and all
they
that.
Come back and that's bullshit, dude. Shit. Give me a 21-year-old freshman lineman that has been out, that can get in shape in 6 months when he gets home, over an 18-year-old, freshman lineman any day.
Well, who's the quarterback that went on his mission and he committed to UCLA? Or no, BYU. It was Olsen, I think.
Olsen.
Oh, okay.
And then he ends up going to UCLA, and he totally lost his edge. Before his mission, he was great. He was on track to being, onto the NFL or whatever. And then after his mission, he totally lost his edge.
I don't know.
Taysom Hill was, I think he was at or committed to and went to either Utah or another school, and then went on his mission and came back to BYU. So, whatever. Maybe I know that's talked about a lot, and BYU fans and apparently some Utah fans are very sensitive to that. You guys get very
because you're waving the conspiracy theory flag like it's unfair. These are grown men playing against my young student athletes at Arizona State. This is bullshit. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, man. I'll take a 19-year-old Alabama recruit.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Over a 26-year-old anything BYU has.
Yeah, that's a fair point. You notice it's the ASU fan that's bitchy, not the USC fan.
Well, USC fans are decidedly humble at this point in time.
Yeah, it's been a rough couple years. Thank you, Reggie.
Oh, thank you, NCAA. I didn't want to get into my tirade with the NCAA, so I resisted. I was so tempted because I was talking about how the NCAA has this quandary, and the whole time through my head, the reason why I couldn't formulate any statement at that point was all I could hear in my head was "fuck NCAA, fuck the NCAA."
Well, I got to tell you, dude. Once Ohio State got nothing, man, that's when USC had to really hate the NCAA.
Hi, this is Skylar from West Haven, Utah, and I have met several prophets through my life. Oh, and did I mention I've seen Jesus? I can't count the number of times I've met that guy. I've also met Elijah once. Oh, did I mention I work in a hospital psychiatric unit? You can comment on this episode on the website, infantsonthrones.com, and if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes. I did. Anyone for the closing prayer?
So here's a question. How many of our listeners just This is the worst episode we've ever put out because we're just
there's no way any of this is going in. There's
No. So okay, so
football navel gazing. Although, in fairness, I was thinking about this the other day. Bob does not get to complain about football and discussions about football when he has done like 3 dedicated episodes
on video games
to bullshit video games. Not like cool video games, but like I don't even
roll dice video games.
Yeah,
right?
like nerd video games.
yeah, not Madden. He
Not
played
cool
Madden.
games that like football players would play. But
yeah, like I'm mad.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.